Welcome back to the Hizoria development series. In the previous episode we covered some of the combat system changes in Hizoria version 3. We looked at loot, weapons, weapon perks, defense, damage calculation, and what happens when a hero falls in battle. But combat is only one side of an adventure. The other side is the challenge that players face, the creatures they encounter, and the world they explore. So in this episode we're going to look at monsters, elemental effects, and one of the biggest changes happening to Hizoria's overall design, moving away from being a strict dungeon crawler game and becoming a much more open world fantasy RPG. A major part of any fantasy adventure is the enemies players face. In Hizoria, monsters are designed to be more than just enemies with high health and damage. Each creature should feel unique with its own strengths, weaknesses, abilities and mechanics that players need to understand. Every monster has its own monster card containing all the information needed to run the encounter. This includes their health, damage, elemental weakness, resistances and any special abilities they possess. The goal is to make every encounter feel different. A creature shouldn't simply be a stronger version of something players have already fought. Instead, players should have to adapt their strategy depending on what they are facing. One challenge I found with tabletop games is making sure encounters remain balanced as players progress. A monster that is challenging for a group of new adventurers may become completely insignificant later in the game. To solve this, monster health in Hizoria scales depending on the party. The base health of a monster is calculated using the number of the players and their average level. The monster card then provides an additional amount of health depending on the specific creature. This allows encounters to remain threatening while still allowing different monsters to have their own difficulty levels. Monsters deal damage in much the same way as players. Just like player characters, monsters can fight using weapons, cast powerful spells, or rely on their own natural attacks such as claws, fangs, beaks, talons, or crushing jaws. Depending on the creature, these attacks use different damage dice ranging from the d4 all the way up to a d20. This creates much more variety between enemies. A goblin armed with a dagger will fight very differently from a griffin slashing with its talons, or a powerful mage hurling devastating spells from afar. The goal is to make every encounter feel distinct, encouraging players to think carefully about how they approach each fight, rather than relying on the same strategy every time. Beyond basic attacks, some monsters have unique abilities that make them much more dangerous. These abilities can completely change how an encounter plays out. Some creatures may have powerful attacks, others may have defensive abilities, some may even be able to summon additional creatures to assist them. Summoned creatures create extra challenges during combat, but they work differently from normal enemies. When defeated, summoned creatures do not drop souls, which are used for dead players to come back to life. This prevents players from exploiting encounters by repeatedly defeating summoned enemies for progression. One of the biggest ways Hizoria encourages strategic thinking is through elemental weaknesses and resistances. Not every enemy can be defeated by simply using the strongest attack available. Some creatures may be vulnerable to certain elements, while others may resist them completely. The possible elements in Hizoria include ice, water, acid, fire, lightning, darkness, corruption and light. A player who prepares the right equipment and abilities before an encounter can gain a major advantage. However, entering a fight unprepared can turn an easy battle into a difficult one. Alongside elemental damage, Hizoria also includes a system of effects that can impact both players and monsters. Effects create temporary changes that last for multiple rounds. When an effect is applied, effect tokens are placed on the target. At the end of each round, the effect activates and one token is removed. Once all tokens are gone, the effect ends. This creates an easy way to track ongoing effects during combat while also allowing battles to become more dynamic. Each element has its own unique effect. Ice can apply the frozen effect. When frozen, a target loses all movement speed but can still take actions and use abilities that don't require movement. This allows ice to control enemies without completely removing their ability to participate. Fire applies the ablaze effect. A blaze causes a target to take fire damage at the end of each round for a set amount of time. This creates pressure on enemies and forces players to deal with the effect before it becomes too dangerous. Lightning applies the electrocuted effect. Electrocuted targets lose movement speed and the lightning can spread to nearby allies. However, each time the lightning jumps, the damage is reduced. This creates a dangerous effect that can punish groups standing too close together. Acid applies the pierced effect. Against targets with any amount of defense, acid damage becomes even more effective by dealing double damage. This makes acid especially useful against heavily protected enemies. Poison applies the poisoned effect. Rather than directly dealing damage, poison weakens a character by reducing their base damage for a period of time. This makes poison dangerous because it reduces a player's effectiveness during combat. The stunned effect reduces the number of actions a target can take during their turn. However, stun does not stack, and after being stunned the target gains a temporary resistance against being stunned again. Light applies the enlightened effect. Unlike many other elements, light focuses on supporting allies. Characters affected by enlightened can improve nearby allies by increasing their defense and improving healing received. Dark applies the cursed effect. Cursed targets increase the damage dealt by nearby allies but become harder to heal. This creates an interesting risk and reward mechanic. Finally, corruption applies the corrupted effect. Corruption makes abilities more difficult to use by increasing cooldowns and reducing available mana. This makes it especially dangerous against characters who rely heavily on skills and spells. While these systems improve combat, one of the biggest changes happening in Hizoria isn't a single mechanic. It is the overall direction of the game. Earlier versions of Hizoria were much more focused around a traditional dungeon crawl experience. The gameplay loop was return to a home base, prepare your equipment, enter a dungeon, fight enemies, collect loot, return and prepare again. And while this structure worked, as Hizoria expanded I realized it didn't fully represent the type of game I wanted to create. The world of Hizoria has grown far beyond a collection of dungeons or a singular home base. It now includes different continents, regions, cultures, factions, creatures and stories. Because of this, keeping everything centered around returning to a single home base began to feel restrictive. The world itself became the adventure. So Hizoria is moving towards a much more open world RPG structure. Players are no longer simply travelling between a base and separated dungeons. Instead, they can explore the world, discover new locations, encounter different groups, complete quests, and choose their own path. Dungeons do still exist, they are still an important part of Hizoria. However, they are no longer the entire experience. A dungeon can now be an ancient temple hidden deep within a forest, a forgotten mine beneath a mountain, a ruined fortress controlled by powerful enemies, a dangerous location with its own history and purpose. Rather than being isolated levels, dungeons become part of the wider world. The reason for all of these changes is because the world of Hizoria became too large to stay contained. As more regions, creatures and stories were created, it became clear that the game needed to evolve alongside the world. The goal of Hizoria isn't just to give players battles to overcome. It is to create a world where players can create their own stories. One group might become legendary heroes defending a kingdom. Another might explore forgotten ruins searching for lost knowledge, and yet another might hunt dangerous monsters across the wilderness. The adventures should be shaped by the players themselves. That covers monsters, elemental effects, and one of the biggest changes happening to Hizoria's overall design. While combat remains a major part of the game, it is only one piece of a much larger experience. Hizoria is becoming less about completing a series of encounters and more about exploring a living fantasy world. And that just about covers all the content for version 3.0.5. As development goes on, I will continue to create devlogs on each version. The speed at which these devlogs are made will probably decrease, but I will try to fill in the gaps with other content. In the next video, I'll be covering something completely new in regards to the world of Hizoria, so stay tuned to find out more. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching, and let your imagination run wild.